Please give this video a like and subscribe!
This is HBR News number 542, World War III, again, where we discuss the news of the week and give it the Badger treatment. Hello everybody and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. I hope you guys are doing well this week and that you're laughing at all of this absurdity so that you are not consumed by it. I'm your host Brian. I'm joined by, as always, my lovely co-hosts Hannah Wallen and Dr. Ranmercam. So, on this week's HBR News, I guess there was something that happened over the weekend. I had to do a little bit of digging to find it, but apparently we're going to be talking about this little dispute going on, this gentleman's quarrel that's happening in the Middle East. Shocking statistics regarding grooming children in public schools that you don't want to miss for sure. The Boy Scouts might be actually becoming the Boy Scouts again and more, so stick around. It's going to be a good time. And be sure to join us afterwards for the patron-only show. So I got this from the Daily Mail. It was going around on X. And I just thought it'd be kind of a fun little thing. Castrate your ex for £10. RSPCA's neutering scheme where you can rename a stray cat after a love rat. So that's probably going to be interesting to read through.
I don't understand any part of that headline. Is it supposed to be metaphorical?
No, it's
Oh, you name a cat after an ex-lover. Okay.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Which it depends on what your beliefs are, because there is this concept called sympathetic magic, but I'll explain that in the after show.
Oh yeah, please save it for that. I have a feeling this might be a long sausage. So we're going to be checking out this article about castration and ex-boyfriends and whatever else that is. So if you want to join us for that, please become a member, or a badger, as I like to say it, by going to feedthebadger.com/subscribe. $5 a month will get you into a Discord server where you'll be able to watch all the additional content, like these patron shows. Excuse me, like these patron shows. That one snuck up on me. And yeah, if you give it higher levels, you'll be able to be a part of the conversation itself. So please consider joining us. Go to feedthebadger.com/subscribe. And if you don't want to wake up one morning to find that we've been yeeted from the internet, then go to badgerfeed.com or honeybadgerradio.com to find where all of our content lives. Now, with all that out of the way, let us get into today's stories. All right. This one's going to be a bit long because I think that there's a lot of backstory that led to this moment. And I think that a lot of people who are chiming in on this, specifically talking about Iran and what happened over the weekend, I think that we got to take in the full context and then sort of address it from that perspective. Okay, so
there's like 80 years of full context there.
Yeah, and at least with the United States, there's like at least, since like 81. But anyway, look, ongoing conflict.
Back to 1953.
Yes. So the ongoing conflict.
It's a very old place.
It's an old place. The ongoing conflict between the United States, Israel, and Iran, which escalated into full-scale war, according to some, on February 28, 2026, stems from decades of tensions, but was immediately triggered by failed nuclear negotiations and Iran's brutal suppression of nationwide protests in early 2026, which some people seem to have already forgotten what's going on. Joint U.S.-Israeli airstrikes targeted Iranian leadership, nuclear facilities, missile sites, and air defenses, killing Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, sorry, I'm going to butcher the names, and other top officials, including the defense minister and IRGC commanders. And also, they had appointed another supreme leader, and then he was killed shortly after by U.S. forces as well. It's almost like the U.S. was like spawn camping. Iran retaliated with hundreds of ballistic missiles and drones, striking Israel, U.S. bases in Iraq, Kuwait, and other Gulf states, as well as energy infrastructure. The war has expanded regionally. Israel launched offensives against Hezbollah in Lebanon, killing dozens, while Iranian-backed militias in Iraq and Yemen have joined the fray. As of March 3rd, 2026, U.S. and Israeli forces have conducted over 2,000 strikes, achieving air superiority over Tehran, but Iran has closed the Strait of Hormuz, disrupting global oil supplies and causing prices to surge 9%. President Trump has signaled the campaign could last weeks. I think he specifically said 4 weeks, aiming for regime change, though no ground invasion is confirmed. Diplomatic efforts falter, with Trump rejecting Iranian overtures as too late, while global markets tumble and evacuations occur across the Middle East. U.S.-Iran relations began amicably in the mid-19th century, but soured in the 20th. The 1953 CIA-orchestrated coup ousted Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh after he nationalized Iran's oil, reinstalling Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi as a U.S. ally. During the Cold War, the U.S. provided military aid to Iran, viewing it as a bulwark against Soviet influence. Relations collapsed with the 1979 Islamic Revolution, which overthrew the Shah. Revolutionaries seized the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, holding 52 Americans hostage for 444 days. The U.S. severed ties, imposed sanctions, and backed Iraq in the 1980 to 1988 Iran-Iraq War, which killed over 1 million. Tensions persisted through Iran's support for proxy militias, terrorist acts like the 1983 Beirut bombings, and nuclear program. The 2015 JCPOA nuclear deal under Obama eased sanctions, but Trump withdrew in 2018, reimposing maximum pressure and assassinating IRGC commander Qasem Soleimani in 2020, which was also supposed to start World War III, but didn't. Biden attempted revival, but talks stalled amid Iran's uranium enrichment and regional aggression, leading to 2025-2026 protests and the current situation. Before the 1979 revolution, Iran under Shah Pahlavi was a modernizing monarchy aligned with the West, emphasizing pre-Islamic Persian heritage over religious identity. It's also worth pointing out that in Iran, it's not really a Muslim country. It is a multi-theological country that was under a Muslim rule or a Muslim dictatorship. So it was like it's not like Iraq or other Islamic countries. So
kind
the Shah's white.
What? Every country in the West is under communist dictatorship, even though 90% of people don't want it.
Yeah, exactly. The Shah's White Revolution in 1963 introduced land reforms, women's suffrage, and industrialization, boosting literacy from 15% to over 50% and expanding universities. Tehran became a cosmopolitan hub with Western fashion, cinemas, and nightlife. However, the regime was authoritarian, suppressing dissent via the Savak secret police, which tortured and executed opponents. Economic growth favored urban elites, exacerbating rural-urban divides and inequality, while secular policies alienated conservative clergy like Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, exiled in 1964 for criticizing the Shah. Life for Iranians under the Shah varied by class and location. Urban middle classes enjoyed expanded education, women's rights, which I put in quote, like voting, divorce reforms, and economic opportunities amid oil booms, with Tehran boasting modern infrastructure and freedoms like unveiled women and mixed gender socializing. Notice how it's all revolving around women? Weird. However, rural peasants faced land inequality despite reforms, and political freedoms were curtailed. Trade unions and opposition parties were banned, press was censored, and thousands imprisoned or tortured by Savak. Religious conservatives resented secularization as Westification. I get that. Fueling resentment that erupted in 1977 to 1979 protests. Overall, it was a period of rapid progress, shadowed by repression and cultural alienation. Iranians' reactions to the 2026 war are polarized. Anti-regime protesters, emboldened by January 2026 massacres, thousands were killed, by the way, in January 2026, celebrate strikes as a chance for liberation, with university students in particular clashing with security forces and some urging overthrow. However, regime supporters mourned Khamenei, rallying in Tehran and viewing attacks as foreign aggression. An internet blackout stifles coordination, but defiance persists in cemeteries and campuses. The diaspora is split. Some hail regime change, others fear civilian deaths and chaos. Overall, youth disillusionment drives anti-regime sentiment, while nationalists unite against invasion. A fair assessment views the conflict as a high-stakes escalation. Iran's nuclear ambitions, proxy warfare through Hezbollah, the Houthis, and Hamas, and domestic repression, 2026 massacres, prompted U.S.-Israeli preemptive action amid stalled talks. Iran, but remember, Trump said he tried to work out a deal with them for a while, and basically it just wasn't working out. Iran perceives it as regime change, aggression, violating sovereignty, retaliating regionally, and risking wider war. Critics argue U.S. involvement lacks congressional approval, echoes Iraq failures, and ignores diplomacy's potential. Proponents see it as neutralizing a threat, sponsoring terrorism, and nearing nuclear breakout. Absent de-escalation, it could fragment Iran, but spark chaos, refugee crises, and global economic fallout. The U.S. potentially benefits by degrading Iran's nuclear program, weakening its proxies, and bolstering allies like Israel and Gulf states, like Saudi Arabia. Regime change could foster pro-Western Iran, reducing terrorism and stabilizing energy markets long term. However, risks outweigh escalation draws in Russia, China. Spikes oil prices, already plus 9%, incurs casualties, and burdens U.S. resources amid public opposition. Past interventions suggest prolonged instability, refugee flows, and anti-U.S. backlash, potentially harming global standing without a clear victory. Casualties in the 2026 war, as of March 3rd, today, 787 killed in Iran, mostly civilians, including 180 at a school, 6 U.S. service members, 52 in Lebanon, 11 in Israel, 8 in Gulf states like UAE and Qatar, and others in Iraq and Syria. Injuries number in the thousands. Historically, U.S.-Iran tensions caused vast losses. Iraq war, 1 to 2 million dead. Proxy conflicts, 241 U.S. Marines in 1983 in Beirut, and recent strikes like the 2025 12-day war, where they lost about 1,190 Iranians. Total U.S.-Iran-related casualties span millions across all of the decades. So this is like I want to talk about it because I think there's a lot of oversimplification of what's going on. Some people are just saying this is for Israel because they're just jay-brained, and I think that we are. It would do us a greater service to try to be a little bit more reasonable. I think that you get to a point where you think that because Israel benefits, it's not good for anyone else, and that's kind of retarded. And I think that, but as far as like what I think about what happened is, I don't know yet. I'm on the fence. I spoke to some people. Some people want their identities protected, but let's just say they're friends of the channel and they've also been on our show before, and they're in the military, or they're veterans, and some of them were very much in support of this and said this should have happened 40 years ago, like back when Ronald Reagan was in office and that the whole thing was going on. And there was at least one person that I spoke to that's like kind of on the fence, but he wants to see how it shakes out. So, but there is definitely like a desire to see this get dealt with in about as, I guess, like a minimal damage as possible. Now, it's too early at this stage to know for sure about anything regarding this, but I think that we should in my opinion, you guys say whatever you want to say in the comments, or Hannah and Mike, but in my opinion, I think that we shouldn't have a definite let's say claim to know anything that we don't know, because a lot of what this administration is doing militarily speaking is very much keeping it close to the chest. Whenever they're approached by press, they're always saying, what are you going to do? And they're like, why would we tell you? That's basically telling the enemy what we're up to. So I would look at the track record, in my opinion, and I'll say that when I think it was like Abdul al-Baghdadi was killed. Everybody was like, "Oh my God, this is going to start a war." It didn't do it. Then when we went after the uranium or whatever that they were building up in Iran, they were like, "This is it. We're going to war." It didn't happen. When we went into Venezuela and took out Maduro, oh my God, war! It's coming because Maduro was in talks with China and Iran and Russia, and that didn't happen, at least not yet. So this is like the same thing. I don't like obviously, like, to say I'm against war is kind of stupid because I don't think anyone here is for it. But I don't want this to turn into a prolonged thing like what happened in 2003. But I do think that 2003, which is, Iraq and all, that is something that we shouldn't allow to keep us from making decisions that we have to make. So that's another thing I want to put out there as well. But anyway, so
and then
go ahead.
We also have to remember, there is pretty much a straight line trajectory from Operation Ajax in 1953 up through the hostage crisis in 1979 and the Iran-Contra scandal following that to this. This is Trump going in and attempting to clean up the colossal, epic mess that has been created by the history of U.S. intervention in Iran, and then followed up with the history of I would say wimpy negotiation styles. And if you're unable to make a deal with Donald Trump, who professionally makes deals and generally tries to find a way for everybody to walk away satisfied when he makes deals, there is something wrong with your end of the deal. That is just the way it is. Like everything else, there's plenty of things to criticize as far as the man's life has gone. But that is one thing that he does very well, and he has always done very well, and he's an expert at it. If Iran had not wanted future conflict, they would have made a deal. And they didn't. So this had to happen. It's very unfortunate. And I really hope it never escalates into a ground war. I really don't want to see that happen. But I don't think that Trump will let it happen. I don't think he'll allow it. And I think he can stop it. So I do have hope for this. But that history, there isn't any way to come out of that without doing something like this. And I know a lot of people are saying, well, we caused this. We should have just gotten out of there. We should have just stopped the conflict with them. Well, there is no such thing. When you set off a rabid dog, you poke it with a stick and it breaks down the fence and it's chasing you, you can't just stop and say, okay, I'm done. Stop chasing me. That's not how that works. So there was no alternative really to this. And that, like I said, as unfortunate as it is, this is essentially Trump shooting the rabid dog. And he should have done it the first time around. We're in this situation now because he didn't do it during his first administration. Now, I understand that he had a lot going on during his first administration, and he didn't have the best advisors, and he didn't have the situation where he realizes now that the entire bureaucracy is his enemy, unless he replaces them. But and that's simply the way it is.
Yeah, what pains me the most is to see so many of my friends sort of falling out with each other, and people who I've never met but respect, falling out with each other so hard over this. Going into it, it was so hard to predict who was going to go which way among the proverbial right. Obviously, the proverbial left are just going to go with Trump bad and Israel bad, no matter what. So This is a slam dunk for them. They don't even have to think about it. And that's them in their element. But among the proverbial right, there is a perturbing split. And it's because of what they think they know. People keep making the mistake that they can see through the fog of war so clearly and so far reaching that they will get really quite vicious with everyone who thinks they can see through it in a different direction. But when it comes to the fog of war, it takes years, if not decades, to even begin to get a clear picture of what's going on, especially if that war has been going on for as long as that. That's how we can already tell that the billions of our taxes that have been pumped into the Ukraine war have been a senseless waste, because it's been 4 years and nothing's been achieved except the torturous death of millions of men. But hey, it's not our men. It's not men who are of any use to us, so fuck it, who cares, right? Whereas the Venezuela strike, maybe you could have been forgiven if on day one you thought it would result in another forever war, but it didn't. By all accounts, there wasn't even a day two. It goes to show you how little there is to know or to be sure about in the early stages. And I've been dreading laying any of this out because every detail for or against is going to piss off everyone in the opposing camp. The only thing you can do is line it all up together in a stack of buts. A lot of Iranians want America to save them from their government, and they seem to be celebrating the death of the Ayatollah. But a lot of Americans want foreigners to save them from their government, and they will dance in the street when Trump dies. Would that make it okay? And this all looks like it's in Israel's interests, but one might say it's also in America's interest to get all that oil so China doesn't get it. But Iran only accounts for 3% of China's oil, and Venezuela only accounts for 2% of China's oil. But at least this is getting rid of many an international terrorist cell hell bent on the whole death to America thing. But not many of those Iranian terrorists have actually made it into the West, be it America or Europe. If you could have a stab at Pakistan, that would certainly do us a solid. And they actually do have nukes, like now, for what it's worth. But I suppose they're saving them all for India. Or perhaps Afghanistan at this point. The Pakis and Afghanis have decided to start skirmishing, in case you all didn't know. It's like a bar fight at this point. One scuffle breaks out, so another one breaks out as well, because why the fuck not? Hey, as long as it's Muzzies fighting Muzzies, don't interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake. Dividing the Muslim world helps prevent it from consolidating into a caliphate. That does seem to be what Israel is for, albeit not even ostensibly. But Iran was already a diversive force in that sense, what with it being a Shia state surrounded by Sunni states. And Shias and Sunnis hate each other even more than Protestants and Catholics hate each other, considerably more. So Iran was never going to be part of the caliphate, especially given that its theocratic regime has never really had the approval of its populace on the whole. So this isn't really benefiting Israel either, in the long term or the short term. Israel is getting their shit wrecked as well, along with any other country in the vicinity of Iran, as Iran hurls every missile it has in every direction, just to make sure that it's making use of all of its downloadable content. But at least Israel isn't going to have to deal with the quote-unquote refugees. It's going to be good old Europe and our batshit crazy government siphoning millions of theocratic criminals in the flimsy pretense that they're the good guys and that this is all our fault. But hey, at least Iranian women get to dress like whores now. But historically, that doesn't seem to solve any problems, ladies and gentlemen, does it? Women's rights in general doesn't seem to solve any problems. I mean, bully for you, Iranian ladies, you get to put half-naked pictures of yourself on the internet now. Whoop-de-doo. You better hope Grok doesn't see you doing that and is able to draw half-naked pictures of you on Twitter, because then we'll all lose our right to use Twitter. Fucking golf clap. Needless to say, no one on any side of this flame war seems to give a shit about Iranian men's rights, but whatever, that's part of the course. Women give the thumbs up, men get killed. Women give the thumbs down, men get killed. And so on and so forth forever. And of course, the Republicans may be a disappointment, as they often are, but the Democrats would give you exactly the apocalypse they've promised you. So don't be pretending that this wouldn't have happened if under Harris administration. So, yeah, the closest we can get to a consensus is, I don't know, the Iranian government is a counterproductive, broken machine. The Israeli government is a counterproductive, broken machine. The US government is a counterproductive, broken machine, and every European government is a counterproductive, broken machine. I'm sure you can see the theme developing here. If you find yourself defending the Ayatollah or defending Netanyahu or even defending Trump, if you find yourself praising any of these counterproductive machines because they're not as bad as the other ones, well, I think you might be missing the point. Can any of us ever have the kind of revolution where we actually diminish the power of the counterproductive broken machine that rules over us? Like, instead of just occasionally changing its regime. Personally, that's the only thing I can see through the fog of war. I'm thinking maybe the dodgy cunt who keeps turning on the artificial fog machine might just be the man behind the curtain. Or maybe even the woman behind the curtain. Da, da, da. And I too am just yelling into the void. But it's my job to yell into the void. And if it's your job to, fine. Let's keep squabbling. At least it keeps us laughing at this absurdness so we're not consumed by it. Dr. Ryan McCammon to News, Honey Badger Radio.
Yeah, I mean, again, my final thing is I'm not thrilled with this, but like, I don't know what's gonna happen, and neither does anyone who's watching this. And you know, I get a lot of shit, you know, about voting for him from certain people, some people that watch us. Like, they think that if Kamala Harris was in office, this wouldn't have been a lot worse. Probably would have been this plus infinity migrants. But on the plus side,
Well,
I
it
will
would have
say
been-
that if there are Iranian refugees, take solace in the fact that Iranians have a much higher IQ than most other people in the Middle East, because it's not really a Muslim nation. So it's just sort of like, you know, it's a nation of mixed religions under a theocratic regime, or at least it was. The other thing I was going to add is that school that got bombed, it was not bombed by the Americans or Israel. It was bombed by Iranians. So some of the collateral damage that has harmed people was done by their own people. So,
I want to add one more thing too, because I've seen a lot of people make the comparison between protesters here in the United States and protesters in Iran, and I need to point something out. All right, ever since 1953, when the U.S. installed a totalitarian government there, and then the revolution installed another totalitarian government to replace that one, and they've had a totalitarian government ever since. Iran has murdered its protesters for protesting. We have not done that in this country. The closest the United States has ever gotten to that during that time has really been conflicts between violent protesters and inexperienced military, young military in the Vietnam War, during the Vietnam War. And if I remember right, the death toll was 4. There's a song about it, and it doesn't tell about how those protesters burned down half the city before the night before. And how one of the deaths was a gawker who had come out of the dormitories to gawk at the protests after being told not to, and was hit by a stray bullet, not shot at.
Also, there's Ashley Babbitt and
Yeah.
the other 3 men who we don't care about, who died at that particular protest.
And all of those were in the midst of what could be considered, like, what she was doing wasn't violent toward any person, but again, they weren't hauled off and executed, right? They were killed in action in a violent conflict, right? We haven't had where Iran stops in and just completely floods the square with bullets, and there are just piles of bodies afterwards. Nothing like that has happened here. Right? We haven't had that. We haven't had a Tiananmen Square. We haven't, had anything like that. Now, the Democrat leadership did wrongly incarcerate a group of people for significantly longer than they would have been incarcerated if they had committed all of the crimes they were accused of, and had done so under a legal regime that was acting correctly under the law. But again, they still didn't murder those people. So it's not really a good comparison.
All right, well, we're going to move on to the next story, but let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. Again, this is developing, so I don't know, like, I'm not expecting anything major to break through for a while on it. But yeah, I'd like to know what you guys think. Please leave us send us a message, or send us a super chat, or just leave us a comment. By the way, I did get a super chow the other day. I want to say it was like 2 days ago. So I'm going to read it out now. It must have come out after Allison and I were done with our show. So an anonymous person sent us $50. Thank you, Anonymous, and says, in high school, I befriended Maria, a bi girl obsessed with anorexia, pro-ana forums, and serial killers. Excuse me. She loved a story about a teen prostitute lovingly murdered by her killer, and used the phrase murdering lovingly. She was manipulative, staged an ambush with her ex, then lied to police that I was stalking her. I now suspect she pushed anorexic girls towards suicide online, and that my simping for her could have gotten me killed. Wow, that is dark. All right, well, thanks for the super chow, rather. Anonymous, if you're listening, I know that this one got put through 2 days ago, but maybe you're here now. And yeah, thanks for the super chow. I'm sorry that happened. Speaking of which,
I got hard to even just call that red flags. That's like an entire
yeah, right.
red fabric manufacturing plant. That's just insane.
No, it's absolutely like way out there. Well, you know what? There's no, because I gotta say that it is possible that this person was, made like sort of like got into this belief system online, maybe in like Tumblr or like with her online friends or something, because that's just like lovingly murdered and anorexia forums and stuff. Like,
yeah,
that's
we actually could probably do a whole show on the toxic and bizarre play acting fantasy life of teenage girls, and
Mhm.
some of the craziness that it has led to, like the Slender Man killing.
Yeah, the Slender
Well,
Man
they didn't.
killings. Yeah.
They didn't. If I remember right, they didn't actually kill that girl. They tried to kill her, and she survived, but it was still an attempted murder. But there's been other prior to that, like before the existence of Slender Man. One of my friends, like, I was all into horror novels and stuff like that, and she thought I would like this true crime book, and it was kind of like a train wreck. It's one of these things that it's not entertaining, it's because it's real, and it was very upsetting, but you can't look away once you've started reading it. And I went through the whole thing because I needed to find out if it was as bad as it looked, and from the beginning it never got any better. And essentially, this group of 4 girls were really good friends, well, really close friends, and, uh, they decided that one of the 3 of them decided that the 4th one had to die, and they had this active fantasy life around this. There was no Slender Man involved, there was no nothing. They had lesbian relationships, and all that, but there was nothing else really abnormal about these girls. Nothing unusual about them, other than that they fell into the minority of people that are homosexual instead of bisexual. And lots of other people that are in that category have not committed any acts of violence whatsoever. Right. So this had to be more connected to just their psychology as girls. And they brutally murdered this 4th girl. And the unraveling of the case by police and everything never did uncover anything other than these girls were nuts. They were sociopathic, they were violent and mean. And it was essentially, they mean girled her to death with physical violence, and not just the usual cry bullying that girls involved in. This kind of behavior is girls, when they're in junior high, in high school, can get themselves caught up in cult-like mentalities as a result of their need for a cohesive social group, and it can become pathological. They can end up Their relational aggression can turn to physical violence, or they can end up bullying someone to death. This is not unusual behavior, and so there are many forums that are pro anorexia. There are many forums where, yeah, it's Xerox has it right. The twisted sisterhood of the traveling pants. Yes, that is a very good way to put it, and it is very twisted. And they do really fuck with each other mentally, and they are violent toward each other physically. And without the intervention of mature adult women, who are becoming very scarce in the world, this grows. And since most people aren't properly monitoring their kids online, they're not recognizing the danger that their kids are in when they go into forums and talk about whatever they want to with whoever they want to, with no adult intervention. This is a major, widespread, serious issue in the world, especially in the Western world, where we act like girls are adult women the moment they turn 13, and they should just be able to do whatever they want. If you're not strict with your kids, you are doing them a great disservice. And if you allow your kids, male or female, to be on the internet without adult supervision, without knowing who they're talking to and what they are saying, you might as well be sending them into downtown Chicago unsupervised at that age, with lots of money to spend. It's really, I can't emphasize this enough. And you'll probably hear it from me again, because stuff like this happens all the time, and this is the way I'm going to react every single time.
All right. Well, thank you for that. I got a super chow from Richard Bier, and we're going to move on to the next story. So he gives us $5 and says, I will say it again. All girls and women are bi. The difficult part is determining if it's bisexual or bipolar. All right.
Don't think we can't do both.
Yeah, they're totally capable of both. All right, let's move on to the next story. Let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. Okay, Discovery, interesting. Not that surprising for us here at Honey Badger Radio, but it's good that someone has looked at the numbers. So, investigative journalist Catherine Herridge, pictured here, in a February episode of her series Straight to the Point, produced in collaboration with the Los Angeles Times Media Group, interviewed prominent attorney John Manley, known for representing victims in high-profile cases like those against USA Gymnastics doctor Larry Nassar. The discussion focused on what Manley described as an epidemic of sexual abuse, not in churches, but in U.S. public schools, highlighting systemic failures in reporting, in investigation, and in prevention, mostly. Manley emphasized that schools often prioritize protecting their reputation over their students, allowing predators to remain in positions of authority or be quietly transferred to other districts, a practice known as passing the trash. Herridge's report was prompted by the release of the Epstein files, expanding into an examination of child abuse within educational institutions, where victims are frequently disbelieved or silenced due to institutional betrayal. The key finding from the interview is that approximately 17% of K-12 students nationwide, equating to roughly 8.6 to 9.4 million children, based on National Center for Education Statistics data, will experience some form of sexual misconduct by a school employee during their education. This includes behaviors ranging from inappropriate comments and boundary-crossing touches to grooming via social media, sharing explicit materials, and physical assaults like sexual intercourse. Manley cited updated research from education professor Carol Shakeshaft, whose 2024, what an unfortunate name, whose 2024 book, Organizational Betrayal, How Schools Enable Sexual Misconduct and How to Stop It, builds on prior estimates, noting that schools' cultures and structures often enable such abuse through inadequate policies, like a lack of training and a failure to act on red flags. Shakeshaft's estimates, including the 17% figure, draw from a synthesis of recent studies such as those by Grant et al. And Jegelic et al. 2018-2019, which rely on anonymous student surveys to capture self-reported experiences of educator sexual misconduct. So take those statistics with a little bit of a grain of salt. These build on Shakeshaft's earlier 2004 U.S. Department of Education commissioned review, which synthesized existing literature and surveys from the 2000s. The methodology involves case studies of adjudicated incidents, expert witness analyses from over 250 lawsuits, and ecological models examining school environments, though data scarcity remains a challenge due to underreporting and institutional barriers to external research. Another thing that is a big obstacle to getting like a lot of these issues addressed, which is why they just moved the teachers, are teachers' unions, who basically do a lot of work to protect the jobs. I mean, not just of teachers. It's obviously, this is a statistic that is also discussing faculty and staff at schools. But if you think about it, like the majority of people who work in schools are women, like the overwhelming majority, not just as teachers, but even in the sort of like, you know, faculty and administration level. So just like an interesting that this is coming out and they are learning this. It's almost like there's like a side effect to the Epstein files. Like people are like, oh, this is happening in our government. I wonder where else this might be happening. And then people are looking into it, and this is what they found. At least so far, this is still like, you know, ongoing, and obviously is contained to the United States. But this is what we're like, what's sort of like being revealed, you know, about what's going on in our schools. So anyway, I just handed you guys the floor.
17% seems like a really big number, especially on, you know, such a wide scale. That's like 1 in every 6 children. Come back, Catholic Church, all is forgiven. There's a joke in here about forgiveness, as Christ said, but I can't think of it, so shut up. I'm sure the figure is it might be mitigated by the factor of, quote, inappropriate comments and boundary crossing touches. Because what does that mean? If you teach girls that they're being oppressed by anything and everything, then of course they're going to report any instance of brushing past someone as rape, or just boundary crossing touches, and any series of syllables as sexual harassment, i.e., inappropriate comments. On the other hand, this could all be offset in the other direction by what boys are not reporting. After all, they're being taught that everything they do is oppression. So they see grooming on social media as something that happens to other people. For fuck's sake, they see rape as something that happens to other people. Because in many a legal system, it officially is something that only happens to other people. So this is probably being skewed in both directions. And what it could very well mean is that, say, 35% of girls are fantasizing about being groomed and raped, while a completely unknown proportion of boys are being groomed and raped, but only 1% of them actually report it. And this averages out to 17%. Maybe I'm exaggerating. Maybe I'm just assuming that if you teach boys and girls opposite things, then they will report opposite things. Maybe that's why the Catholic Church got away with it for so long, because they were doing it to boys, principally, if not entirely. Maybe that's why schools have got away with it for even longer and on a much larger scale, because it's women doing it to boys. And maybe that's why they'll keep getting away with it, because everyone will look at these statistics and go, 17%? This is an outrage. How dare these male teachers do this to these poor defenseless girls? All the male teachers should be fired just in case. We already did that. These statistics have emerged from schools that have long since purged themselves of male teachers. At this point, the average school has more lesbian teachers than male teachers. Do you know what that means? Can you extrapolate what that means? Yeah, even if girls are being sexually abused, it's women who are doing it. What? How? This is impossible. We must find a way to punish men for this. Unfortunately, we can't find any men in these educational institutions, so I suppose we'll just punish the boys. The boys who refuse to become girls, I mean. We'll find some way of punishing them. We don't quite know how, but I'm sure we'll figure something out, like some kind of sexual abuse, like the shit we've been doing for fucking decades. The moral of the story in the first section was blame the government. And yes, the moral of the story this time is blame the women. Well, why not both? Hey, why not both in both cases? Seems like an appropriate take in a world where everything by default is being blamed on the men and boys who are ruled over by women and governments, the ones increasingly occupy. What the hell did you expect me to say, ladies and gentlemen? Why did you even come here? Hey, I hope it was for the sake of consistency, because that's what you're going to get. Fucking consistency. Yes, governments are the problem, and yes, women are the problem. I hereby yield the floor, as I consistently do.
Alrighty then. The public school sexual abuse issue actually dwarfs the church sexual abuse issue in terms of numbers of victims that we know about. That should tell you something. But something else you should know, this goes clear back to the 19th century. And this is when, at the end of the 19th century, they decided they were going to start as a hygiene and public health issue. They are going to start implementing sex education in high schools, just high schools, teenagers, not children. Right? And this was the NEA first started its push for this, the National Education Association, and that at that time they did not have the level of control over school curriculum that they do today, but they did manage to get Chicago to implement it, the first major city, right? They continued this throughout the entire 20th century, and it expanded. They went from just educating about how pregnancy occurs and how diseases occur in our past between people who are engaged in sex, and then they began expanding it to junior high school kids and then elementary school kids. I remember the first year that we had it when I was in school. I was in the 4th grade, and it would have been 1982. That was the year my mom almost died in a car accident. So my whole life is before 1982 and after 1982. But in any case, that's when we started learning, about all of the different aspects of human sexuality, except the psychological aspects that can cause you to become suicidal when you break up with somebody that you've been having sex with. And they never really got into that, right? About the 1990s, they started to take a turn into sexuality in sex education, and by the time we got to talking about it as a team, they were already grooming students to think that they were born in the wrong body and think that they have a sexual identity and not just a personal identity, right? And that was suddenly, now you have the gender mafia screwing with students' heads, and that evolution over time, I don't think that was an accident, because if they wanted, oh, I hear music in the background, like it sounds like a video game. Is that the news music?
Brian, what are you doing?
Something has turned on somewhere.
Sorry, I don't
on
know what that
somebody's
was.
computer. That's really weird. And in any case, I wonder. I hope that everybody else can hear that, because it's gonna make me sound nuts. But in any case, I think that over time, as progressives and woke ideologues got a hold of the National Education Association, they made that a goal to screw with kids' minds using sex education. So it is no surprise, none, that you end up with more and more sexual abuse in the school system by educators. And that's one thing. The second thing is, we are taught that women have some degree of sexual entitlement, that it's abuse when you tell a woman no. And it's not taught that explicitly, but there is a common theme, I guess you could say, in popular media and popular culture, in social norms in Western culture and so on, that if a woman is sexually interested and you turn her down and make her feel rejected, that that you're the bad guy. And when you combine those things with this idea that women can do no wrong and women's sexuality is giving and nurturing, and that women are some sort of sexual teachers and stuff like that, you get a combination that when there's a female sociopath or other type of sexual predator in charge of a classroom, it's very easy for her to convince herself and the people around her that there's nothing wrong with her sampling from among her students. And people will treat boys who come out and say, this happened to me and I was damaged by it, as if they are somehow abnormal and weird because they didn't like it. But in the meantime, there is research that backs them up when they say they're traumatized. And this is something that we've talked about before. Right? This is from a review published in the Journal of the American Medical Association in 1998. So this is something that we've known about for a long time, by William C. Holmes and group, Holmes and Slap. It's William C. Holmes and Gail B. Slap. The research, the review is titled Sexual Abuse of Boys, Definition, Prevalence, Correlates, Sequelae, and Management. And it is a review that compared and reported on the findings of 166 different studies. So this wasn't some little, we asked 16 boys what their experiences were like or nothing like that. Right? This was a big review. This was a major piece of research. And what they found was that sexually exploited boys, including those who did not consider themselves to be victims, right? Not just those that were upset about it, but those who felt like it was maybe a beneficial experience for them, or those who did not remember their experience. And before I go on with this, I will point out Whittam and Morris in 1997 had found that only 16% of adult men with documented cases of sexual abuse considered their sexual abuse, compared with 64% of women with documented cases of sexual abuse. So 84% of men did not recognize their early childhood experiences of sexual abuse for what they were. 84% of men with documented cases didn't recognize them for what they were. So this research, the fact that this research shows that even those men experience this, very important. Victims experienced greater difficulty controlling sexual feelings and were hypersexual. They were more likely to engage in high-risk sexual behaviors, such as unprotected sex, prostitution, and promiscuity. They had an increased rate of STIs and unplanned pregnancy. Several of the studies had showed that they had double the rate of HIV infection. They found an increased rate of PTSD, anxiety disorders, borderline personality disorder, paranoia, dissociation. Multiple personality disorder is a dissociative disorder, but there are other types of dissociative disorders. Sleep disorders, anger, aggressive behavior, poor school performance, meaning if you have poor academic performance, you then later have more difficulty economically. So being molested as a child can make a boy's income lower for the rest of his life. They had, let's see, I got lost in my list of things here. I have notes for this one. Gender role confusion, insecurity about intimate partner relationships. They're less likely to trust in their ability to make a partnership. And that's with both men and women. So it's not just a matter of like a woman has hurt me, so I can't trust women ever again. There are boys who were gay, who were molested by women, who then lost their ability to have the same level of trust in their future partnerships with men. Their gender role confusion was increased as well. It showed varying degrees of increase in their risk for drug and alcohol abuse, which is slow suicide in many ways, from twice as likely to up to 44 times the risk, including an earlier start down that path. They experienced twice the rate of low self-esteem, behavioral problems, antisocial personality disorder, twice as likely to run away from home or have legal problems, 3 times more likely to have bulimia, which is when you throw up to stay skinny. They were up to 5 times as likely to report other sexual problems like sexual dysfunction, like erectile dysfunction or premature ejaculation, things like that, up to 4 times as likely to experience major depression, and could be up to 14 times more likely to attempt suicide than non-abused males. And if people don't have compassion for all of those things, if you say, well, it's just because they're boys, they're just maybe it doesn't have anything to do with their sexuality. I also want to point out, and this is something that it's been referred to as the vampire myth. It doesn't mean that a victim of sexual abuse will automatically have this result, but it's very clear that sexually abusing a child pushes them toward this result. So there are many, many victims who go on to, not become perpetrators. And there are victims that go on to become something called a poly victim because their boundaries are broken and they have no defense. They can't protect themselves, and they end up getting victimized over and over again before they get some sort of therapy that helps them to not leave themselves defenseless. But and I will say also that both Harvard University and the U.S. Navy found that a tendency towards sexual predation is not a common male behavior. In fact, it's very rare, and the majority of male perpetrated sex abuse is attributable to something like less than 10% of the population. Harvard found 6%, and I believe the Navy found like 13%. But that is among a specific select group that may be more prone to handling conflict with violence. Multiple sources, however, indicate that a history of sexual exploitation, specifically by females during youth, is a significant risk factor for later perpetration of sex crimes by men. So, a woman molesting a boy is a significant risk factor for him growing up to be in that between 6 and 13% that is sexually aggressive. And if a listener doesn't care for any other reason about boys being abused in this manner, if you care at all about future victims of adult males who molest boys or girls, then you want to care about this issue, because clearly something is happening that is changing them. Right? Personally, I care about the first set of things that I read more, because you prevent all those things, you also prevent this. So it is a much more serious issue than people realize. And the fact that we treat female sexuality as if it can do no harm is very misguided and very toxic. And it's very important as parents. If you can homeschool your kids, you should. If you can't homeschool your kids, be careful where you send them and be involved at every step. Know what's going on in their education. Don't send them to overnights at a teacher's house. And my parents were both teachers. They did not host overnights with their students. Right? Now, my brother and I had friends, and we had overnights with our friends. But that wasn't something where mom and dad were bringing kids home from the classroom. Right? This is something that you should be leery of. And it's very important to pay attention if your kid's teacher is bringing kids home. And it's unfortunate, because there are great mentors out there that want to do everything they can to ensure that the children under their care have the best possible future that they can, have the best chance that they possibly can receive and achieve at maximizing their potential maximizing their income, maximizing their enjoyment of life, and so on. And then there are teachers that will molest your kids. And as a parent, if you can't keep your kids out of the school system and teach them at home and decide who they're going to be associated with and so on, your next best bet is to keep very careful track of who your kid is associating with at school and what they're doing, and how much of an interest the teacher is taking in the child. And if your kid ever comes home from school and tells you that they can't tell you about something that happened in school, that is immediately a red flag. That is something that you absolutely have to dig into. Nothing should be secret at school. And the school is not allowed to keep secrets from you. Legally, they're not allowed to keep secrets from you. So there you go. The only people that can protect your children are you, mom and dad. That's it. Everybody else is at least a risk, if not the bad guys. It's you against the world. And live like that. Live that way.
All right. Thank you for that. I got a super chow, and then we're going to move on to the next story. So I got one from Meredith G. She gives us $5 and says, HBR News 542, Honey for the Badger. Finally, someone is talking about abuse in public education in the mainstream media. Let's see where this goes. Yeah, that's what I say. It's a good thing, right? We
I
are
hope
like
so, but
uncovering a truth. What?
they're going to blame men. They're going to try to turn this into, we have to get more men out of schools. And the dumb thing is,
I mean, if they're, yeah, maybe we'll see. I don't know that there's much, because like I said, I think that the overwhelming majority of school staff is female, so
Yeah,
they're
it's
gonna
gonna take-
have to it's gonna take a lot of reality bending to do that. The real
Yeah, no,
obstacle
it's
isn't
gonna
even that;
take-
it's the
it's gonna
unions,
take-
apparently.
it's going to take vigilance from the public to keep them from sweeping this under the rug, that women are highly involved in this.
Yep. All right. Well, anyway, we got to move on to the next story. Let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. Okay. So, this one is care of Mike J. OpenAI, the tech company responsible for ChatGPT, said warning signs were discovered months before a transgender individual killed 8 people in Canada. You guys remember the Canadian trans shooting? It feels like a lifetime ago, right? In June of last year, OpenAI's abuse detector noticed concerning behavior with the account of Jesse Van Rootsealer. Rootsealer, yeah, that's the name. The individual who would go on to kill his mother, his stepbrother, multiple school children, and himself. Thought was given about referring the account to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, but ultimately it was decided that there was not enough credible information to act on, and the user's account was simply banned. This did not stop Rootsealer, though, and he simply made another account after the banning of the first one. After the mass shooting, the company would share the user's second account with the RCMP and would release the following statement, quote, "Our thoughts are with everyone affected by the Tumbler Ridge tragedy. We proactively reached out to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police with information on the individual and their use of ChatGPT and will continue to support their investigation," end quote. The company also vowed to change their safety policies going forward.
So this is just an extension of the dilemma of having a surveillance state that only serves to surveil enemies of the state. I don't quite know what the situation is in Canada, but for a glimpse of your future, ladies and gentlemen, you only have to look to London, England, not London, Ontario. You could walk from one end of London to the other, and you'll be on at least one camera at every step of your journey. Does this prevent crime? Does this even serve to solve crime? Apparently not. Crime has been soaring to all new heights since this Big Brother surveillance state has been implemented, especially violent crime. But that's because the violent crime is usually committed by the client groups, the people who cannot be arrested because to arrest them would be racist or sexist or Islamophobic or indeed transphobic. The people tasked with combing through the footage are the same people who have been tasked with what we might call reverse DEI. We don't want diversity in our prisons. We want straight, white, cis men in our prisons. And we will only use the Big Brother surveillance state to achieve that end. And it's the same online. And not just with ChatGPT, not just with AI in general. Before AI, people would just search for things on Google. Search engines have always been a primitive form of AI. After all, you ask them questions and they answer it with a series of links. If your question is, how do I build a bomb? Your account gets flagged. Even if you don't have an account, your IP address gets flagged. In the old days, you wouldn't immediately get reported to the police, but your search data would indeed get recorded in the event that the police wanted it. But since then, the Big Brother surveillance state has extended to such search engines and their AIs in the same way it extended to the endless network of CCTV. The authoritarianism is fueled by the oikophobia. Ask your computer, how do I kill my family? And it'll go, here's how you kill your family. And it gives you directions to the nearest abortion clinic. But ask it, how do I kill foreigners? And 3 seconds later, after you hit the enter key, you hear the fucking sirens. Woo, 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 you're under arrest. And that's the end of your story. But Doc, you have no evidence for this. You're just asserting it. Go to ChatGPT. It's right there. Go to any popular AI chatbot and ask it any series of questions you like pertaining to race and gender. Ask it, are humans apes? It will say, yes, humans are apes. Ask it, are black people apes? It will say, no, black people are not apes. That is a racist question. And wham, bam, thank you, man. You are on the list. See, the online surveillance state has been programmed with the same parameters as the offline surveillance state that we call the police, because they are both operated by and in the accordance of, you guessed it, the governments who rule over us and the women who rule over the government. Consistency! Ladies and gentlemen, I am able to present these ethical dilemmas consistently because there is a pervasive ideology that predetermines the outcomes. That's why we have wars that are detrimental to everyone. That's why we have schools that are detrimental to everyone. That's why we have machine gods that are detrimental to everyone, because the purpose of the system is to be detrimental to everyone. For generations, we've been worrying about Skynet, about what could happen if an artificial intelligence decides that humans need to be wiped out. Well, maybe when we turn to machines to solve our problems, we've already decided that humans are not fit to solve our problems. So maybe Skynet was inevitable from the very beginning. Not the very beginning, not just of the Industrial Revolution, but of the first machine. whatever that may be. The wheel, perhaps, when combined with the axle, so as to create a machine. And yes, the wheel made us lazier. That's not to say we shouldn't have invented the wheel, but one might say it has made us less appreciative of our legs. And the computer has made us less appreciative of our minds. So yeah, the solution is simple. Go for a walk every now and again. Turn off the computer. Turn off the car. And think for yourself every now and again. At the same time, you think walking and thinking. The walking helps the thinking, and the thinking helps the walking, and it'll make you much less likely to kill your family. Chat GPT or no Chat GPT, school or no school, government or no government. Get out there and touch grass. It all becomes much less of a problem if you can be content with the company of no one but yourself and nature. It sounds cliched, but it's true. I would do it right now, but it's midnight and I'll probably get mugged by some kind of troony shit skin if I went out and walked right now. So, whatever. Let's get on with the show. Oh, God.
All right, Hannah, do you want to say anything about this story?
Yeah, but first I should probably unmute. Some things that I would point out. The first thing, and I know there are going to be a lot of people that are going to push back on me for this, but laziness is a choice. It's not something that machines make you do. It's not something that convenience makes you do. And it is the ultimate cause of our inability to catch mass shooters in the likelihood stages before they actually perpetrate their crimes, right? It's always somebody else's problem if somebody is a little bit off. It's always somebody else's problem if somebody is way off, and it's always somebody else's problem if something somebody is saying is getting scary, right? And before they get to the point where it's scary enough to go to law enforcement, they are at a point where it's scary enough for you to say, hey, whoa, wait a minute, what you're saying is wrong and here's why, and try to get them to listen to you. And before they get to that point, they're at least at a point where you should be able to say to them, hey, you're not very good at considering other people's experiences, or to the people around them that are abusing them when the individual is responding to abuse. Hey, you're driving this person off the deep end. This behavior is unacceptable, and we used to be able to do that. People wonder why there was this big explosion of mass violence among teenagers during the latter half of the 20th century. Well, there wasn't. There wasn't a big explosion. There was a slow creep, and it was contributed to by a variety of things, including the offloading of childcare from parents to the public school system and the daycare systems in the United States. If you're not the one who is raising your children, if you're not the primary person who is raising your children, somebody else is doing it. You can be guaranteed that somebody else is influencing them. Children don't raise themselves, right? And so if you allow that to happen, and then your child becomes a criminal, or your child becomes suicidal, becomes a drug addict, becomes an unwed parent, instead of becoming a factory worker or a soldier or an educator or a nurse or any other well-adjusted working individual who can pay for the things they want in life and make themselves happy without doing harm to other people, then you are still at fault If somebody else raised your child because you neglected that, because you didn't exhibit vigilance, you didn't keep track of what your child was doing, that's your fault as a parent. And there are a lot of people that don't want to face that. Right? If you're the older sibling and your younger sibling starts making stupid choices, and you don't go to mom and dad and say, hey, Junior here is not realizing some of the stuff I learned when I was growing up, and I don't know what to do about it as the older sibling influence. What do I do? And get their help and get them to help. You've just let your younger sibling down. If you're the younger sibling and you find out your older sibling is doing things that they're not supposed to be doing, that's going to cause their trajectory to go off track, you speak up. And it's families don't do that anymore. And it's to the degree now, like, if I had gotten to do things the way that my family always raised me to do when I grew up, if I hadn't made one choice that put the cart before the horse and caused a whole series of events that screwed that up, we would have been raising our children close to my husband's family in the community where he grew up. And if my brother-in-law had come and said, your son or your daughter's doing this, and it's a little bit disconcerting that they may have problems later because of it, I wouldn't have said butt out, because the way my family was raised, when something like that happens, you talk about it, you learn about it, you figure out whether it's a problem, and then if it is, you do everything you can to remedy it. And today, everybody's all individualistic. They're offloading their responsibilities to machines and other people, and they're not caring about their families and how their kids are raised. And yeah, the people at Chat GPT, their policy sucked. Right? That was bad. I'm not excusing that. But it shouldn't have been solely their responsibility. Where was this individual's family? Where was the safety network, the human network that should have stopped this from happening before it became Chat GPT's responsibility? I don't like the fact that people are turning to machines for everything now, but that's a symptom. Where did this individual learn to do that? Do we need to go back to the anti-drug commercials from, I think it was the 80s? I learned it from you. I learned it. I picked it up from you. I saw you doing it. That's essentially where we are now. I mean, our kids and our grandkids are learning to offset responsibility for determining how they behave to machines. The next generation's in real trouble if we don't turn that around. It won't matter. It won't matter if we have an iRobot future. It won't matter if we have a Terminator future, because it's already happened mentally. Mentally, we have the iRobot and the Terminator future today. Today, people are using machines to do their homework, and machines to decide who they're going to date, and machines to decide what job they're going to get, and machines to decide what actions they're going to take in their everyday life. They're turning to machines for spiritual advice, the most godless thing on the planet. A man-made invention that has no soul for spiritual advice. And we wonder why there's no failsafe to stop kids from shooting each other. Maybe it's because we are offsetting our responsibilities for our connections to other human beings and maintaining those connections, maintaining those relationships when we're supposed to be doing that ourselves. And if I can recognize that, I'm not all that good at maintaining lots and lots of close relationships. It's one of the reasons that we figured out I was autistic. If I can do that, if I have to tell you that, that means that there's a problem and it really needs to be addressed. And until that happens, we will continue to see stories like this. There is no amount of surveillance that will change things. Only people taking responsibility for their own interactions in their own circles of friends and family. That's it. That's all we can do.
All right. Well, thank you for that. Let me just see if there's any super chats or anything, and we will move on to the next story. Okay. Yeah, let's move on to the last story. Let me know what you guys think about this one in the comments in the meantime. Okay. So, Secretary of
Why
War.
do I have 30 points buck stuck in my head now?
Secretary of War Pete Hegseth announced on February 27th that the Pentagon will conditionally continue its long-standing support for Scouting America, formerly known as the Boy Scouts of America, after the organization agreed to eliminate, so they did so under the condition that the organization agrees to eliminate all diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. This deal came after Hegseth had threatened to end military backing, including access to Department of War facilities, equipment, and personnel support, due to what he described as the group's embrace of woke policies, including DEI programs, a name change from the Boy Scouts, so basically becoming the Girl Scouts, acceptance of girls, and perceived dilution of the values like duty to God. As part of the agreement, Scouting America committed to complying with President Trump's executive order after barring DEI efforts in public and private sectors, removing DEI-related language from programs and publications, and discontinuing the Citizenship in Society merit badge that prompted diversity, equity, inclusion, and some other social justice type, leadership. The arrangement is not without caveats. Hegseth emphasized no more DEI zero and framed it as a step to restore the organization's original focus on developing boys, while criticizing elements like transgender inclusion and other radical woke ideology. The Pentagon will review compliance in 6 months and could withdraw support if violations occur. Scouting America has described the changes as aligning with federal requirements to maintain its partnership with the military, though reports note some discrepancies, such as Hegseth's claims about restricting membership based on biological sex at birth, which the organization has not fully confirmed as altering existing transgender youth policies. The deal preserves girls' participation for now and avoids a full reversion to the Boy Scouts name, although that is what Hegseth wants and for what the Department of War wants in the long term, balancing Hegseth's demands with the group's operational continuity. So, they're trying to make it the Boy Scouts again.
This is all well and good. My only caveat is the old Confucian principle of calling things what they are. I don't know if Hegseth himself is calling it woke, or if that's just a secondhand interpretation. But even if he's still calling it DEI, that's still just another euphemism. Woke is a euphemism for oikophobia, and DEI is a euphemism for communism, which is a euphemism for oikophobia. Or in the case of the Boy Scouts, Misandry, which is another term that we really ought to reintroduce into our collective vocabulary. I'm glad someone is pushing back against Misandry. It is long overdue, to say the least. But if you're not calling things what they are, then you're pushing back in the dark. And before you know it, you'll do what blind people do when they walk in the desert. They walk in circles, in diminishing concentric circles. It's the two-dimensional equivalent of a downward spiral. The definition of woke will change. The definition of DEI will change. And as that wind changes, you will change with it. To walk in a straight line, gentlemen, you must find the sun. The sun too will change. It will drift from east to west, but at least this is consistent. Focus on that which changes consistently. Focus on the standard candle. Focus not on contemporary interpretations of the landscape around you. Humans lie. Humans can be deceived. The sun cannot. Follow the sun, sun bro. Oh man, that takes me back. All right, I'm gonna get taken aback. Someone else talk.
All right. There are probably people going, why is he so concerned about this? What's the big deal? Especially if you're not from the U.S. and you don't know the relationship between the scouts and the military. So before I get into the Boy Scout, Girl Scout thing, I'll explain a little bit about that. Boy Scouts, if they reach the rank of Eagle Scout, which I believe is the highest rank available for kids in Boy Scouts, they get some benefits when they join the military. If they are awarded or designated as an Eagle Scout, they get automatic rank advancement. They are at the start at enlistment. They're eligible for an advanced enlistment rank in most U.S. military branches, in the Army, Navy, Marines, and Coast Guard. Sorry, I was going to say National Guard. It's Coast Guard. Eagle Scouts typically enter as E2, skipping the E1 entry rank, so they're slightly higher up. In the Air Force, they can start out as E3, and they get higher starting pay and immediate leadership responsibilities that they would then exert over E2 and E1. And then you have, as they progress in their career, because Eagle Scout rank has it. You can't just make that rank by being in the Scouts for a certain number of years. You have to earn it through the performance of different tasks and demonstrating different skills and so on. And you have to exhibit leadership skills. You have to exhibit discipline and perseverance. You have to exhibit project management skills. So it's stuff that the military actually wants in its leadership. And as a result, besides the initial rank bump when you start, it also gives you you get a more favorable treatment if you are trying to enroll in officer school. You're more likely to be accepted. They're given preference and admissions to military academies in general, and they're more competitive for ROTC scholarships. So if you are going to university and you're going to join ROTC to to fund part of your schooling, you're more likely to get that than somebody who doesn't have any experience in scouts or hasn't reached that rank. So there's a few things. It's not the only thing. Like, if people in the military know that you were an Eagle Scout before you were in the military, there's a level of expectation and trust that you receive, because you know things that you knew things coming in, other people had to learn in boot camp. And so it is very important. And anybody that's talking to a recruiter about entering the military after being in the Boy Scouts, if they've been an Eagle Scout, they want that recruiter to know, so that they can confirm those benefits and make sure they actually get those benefits when they go into the military. But if the United States ends its cooperation with the Boy Scouts, those benefits go down the tube, right? That'll end. And to get to the gender thing, right? Girl Scouts of America is not an organization that is affiliated with Boy Scouts of America. It is not the same. There's no parent organization over the two of them. One, they weren't even started by the same people. One was started by one individual for one purpose, and the other was started by a different individual for a different purpose. And they don't have a whole lot in common. They follow a similar pattern of you have to earn merit badges and increase in rank and so on. But the Girl Scouts don't teach nearly the same set of like survival and citizenship and so on as the Boy Scouts do. They do not have a rank that gives the benefits that Eagle Scout gives in entering the military, and they are not affiliated with the military. You could actually argue that it's actually a giant multi-level marketing scheme to sell cookies using child labor and not be too far off. But it is something that I grew up with friends that were in the Scouts. They had a lot of fun. And so it's not all bad, but it's not the same, and the benefits are not the same. And so I do understand why there were families with girls that wanted their girls to be in the Boy Scouts instead, because there are a lot of benefits to being in the Boy Scouts that don't exist being in the Girl Scouts. But the thing is, men and boys already have enough of their spaces being taken away from them. And it is of utmost importance that if the Boy Scouts decide they're going to create a system for girls that does for future female soldiers what the Boy Scouts does for future male soldiers, in addition to the family-friendly stuff and the shaping of young people's minds and everything, they need to keep it 100% separate. It needs to not have any involvement at all with what the boys are doing. The boys should be able to do their studies, their camping, their earning of merits, their lessons on what those merits are and everything should all be encapsulated in a male mentor, male student environment without the involvement of girls. And it's perfectly acceptable for there to be, den mothers that assist, that support what the men are doing. But the leadership should be men, and the beneficiaries should be boys. And if they're going to do a girls section of that, the leaders of that should be women, and there shouldn't be boys involved. That should be female mentors, female leadership, and it should not interfere with anything the boys are doing. And the things that the boys are doing should not interfere with that. And if the original Girl Scouts organization can't become that, can't work with the Boy Scouts to reform their organization and make it worthwhile for girls in a modern situation, then they are outdated and they need to go. And that would create the influx that the Scouts needed to have enough to have a female wing that has nothing to do and no authority, nothing to do with and no authority over the male wing. But that's the only one of two things that should happen. Either the Girl Scouts should reform and become that, or they should fold and let the girls use the leadership of the Boy Scouts to mold them into that. But it would have to stay separate. There should never be a connection between the two.
No. Well, they're different animals, because the Boy Scouts is like largely, there is some collaboration with the government, obviously, like you mentioned, but it's largely like, supported by sort of independence on a state, let's say arm. But the Girl Scouts is socialized. It's basically made by the state, and the Girl Scouts never went away. It still exists. So basically, there was Girl Scouts and there were Boy Scouts, and then now there's Girl Scouts and there's Girl Scouts.
Yeah, I'm saying that only one of those two should exist, and if
Yeah.
the Girl Scouts aren't willing to become what obviously girls want that because they wouldn't be trying to join the Boy Scouts if they didn't. If they aren't willing to become what girls want, then they need to step aside in their organization and let the Boy Scouts create a separate organization from the boys for girls. That's the only way that should happen because the the idea that boys should just let the girls join in with them and take away the male solidarity, the fraternity of their organization is wholly wrong. They should not do that, and the men of the organization shouldn't let that happen.
And the Girl Scouts only make up 20% of the membership in the Scouts. So it's still majority boys anyways. So they like this whole thing was, I mean, 20% is not anything to scoff at, but like, well,
It's
anyway,
higher
I'm not
than the
going to,
percentage
we've
of the
gone way
military
over. I'm
that's
just saying
female.
that it's already majority boys. Just make it for boys and let the Girl Scouts of America do the things that the girls that joined the Scouts, to give them that. Just like make it
Yeah.
more for those girls. But they're not doing that. They have them learning feminism
No, and in
sewing
fact, they
fucking.
sued to stop the Boy Scouts from doing
Yeah.
it. They sued to stop the consumer from getting what the consumer wanted.
You're
Like,
right.
that should tell you a lot about that organization.
The Girl
and
Scouts
that's
can't really go bankrupt. They run on taxpayer money. They may complain about
right.
needing more money, but they're not going bankrupt.
Well,
They're
I'm not talking about
socialized. It's a
bankruptcy.
socialized
I'm not
organization. It's
talking
not like
about
the Boy Scouts that
I'm
relies
not
on
talking about
charities.
bankruptcy. I'm not talking about
No,
bankruptcy.
I know. I'm responding to somebody in the chat. But go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say this is they don't need to exist, right?
No, they
If the
don't.
government is funding them, and the Boy Scouts are going to create a girls' wing that is separate and independent of the boys' wing, then maybe the government should stop funding the Girl Scouts.
Yep. No, I don't disagree. But anyway, yeah. So we're gonna see. They're gonna check back up in 6 months. We'll see. If they comply. And I mean, I'm optimistic. So there you go. But yes, they're gonna cry about financial struggles because again, they just want more money. It's not like, I don't know if you guys have figured this out yet, but feminism is a grift. It's all about making money and maintaining power. So even if they're doing well, I mean, you can't even measure what it means to do well when you're literally just getting a blank check from the state. So they're just saying they want more. That's it.
And that's women in
And they're
general.
like the people who work there are just like basically just taking taxpayer dollars, and they're not earning it because when they made the Boy Scouts into the Scouts, a bunch of girls went there, so the Girl Scouts are even less relevant as a result of what they did to the Boy Scouts. But look, that aside, we'll follow up in 6 months and see where things go from there. So, I mean, they're making efforts, and like I said, I don't think it's a bad thing that they're doing that. I think it's a good thing. And they should do that. So, anyway, with that said, let us know what you guys think about these potential changes in the Scouts in the comment section.
There is one more thing that needs to be said, right? It is not super important for there to be a scouting organization that serves girls the way the Boy Scouts are served by the boys, or the way the boys are served by the Boy Scouts.
Right.
It's not super important for girls to have any scouting organization. Girls are not in crisis. Boys are, and they do need this.
Yep. All right, so we're going to go into the patron show now. We're going to look at this article, Castrate Your Ex for £10, RSPCA's neutering scheme where you can rename a stray cat after a love rat. So if you guys want to join us for that, please go to feedthebadger.com/subscribe to find out what this story is all about. And I think Hannah was going to tell us a little bit about magic that's related to this in some way. So please consider doing that. And once again, thank you guys for coming on the show. Thank you to Mike and Hannah for your commentary on the stories today. If you guys like this video, please hit like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, hit the bell for notifications, leave us a comment, let us know what you guys think about what we talked about on the show today, and please, please, please share this video because sharing is caring. Thank you guys so much for coming on today's episode of HBR News, and we will see you next Tuesday.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.